Let's Talk JMMA with Charlie Jewett from sogo-kaku.com. This is a podcast about the deep end of Japanese combat sports scene. I'm your host, Shu Hirata from On the Road Management. Now, let's begin. Hey, good morning, Charlie.
Hey, Shu, how are you?
Good. It's 8 a.m. in Tokyo now, right?
Yes, it is.
Yeah. And did you get to watch RIZIN Landmark last night?
I did. I watched it. It was actually kind of interesting because my wife and I were out doing something, so we're actually kind of happy it got delayed because we would have missed the first couple of fights, and there's only four fights.
So this thing got delayed for 1 hour.
Mm-hmm.
Well, exactly 1 hour.
Right.
And what was the reason? Was it because just too many people bought it in the last minute?
For those that aren't familiar, Unext is like a streaming pay-per-view service that kind of does concerts and things like that. Mm-hmm. And according to them, this had more buys than anything they've done before. The biggest event they've ever done, and their servers crashed.
You know, if that's true, that's a big deal because they have done like a big band like Southern All-Stars and Bees, which is like a Beatles and Beach Boys of Japan, I would say. And if you're surpassing that numbers, that's pretty good.
Right. And I'm kind of glad because I'm glad that they stopped the event and waited for the pay-per-view to get back up. Because I remember some promotions that had their first pay-per-views, like Invicta FC comes to mind, where the pay-per-view started getting real sketchy and dropping, and then all of a sudden it just stopped showing. And then they had to refund a bunch of people. And it was nice to see that RIZIN just was like, no, we're going to stop. We're going to wait until this is all resolved, and then we'll start the show, which is easier to do when you only have 4 fights. So
they basically make a determination that they will restart 1 hour later, exactly.
Right.
Mm-hmm. And it took time and did that, right? But I think during that 1 hour wait time, many fighters did the Instagram lives and YouTube lives and stuff like that. It made everything kind of interesting.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting because going into the week, I didn't really have the impression that a lot of people were looking forward to this event.
Mm-hmm.
But then the day of, when the delay happened, all of a sudden everybody was talking about it. So it kind of the event snuck up on you. And I think the delay actually helped create some anticipation for it, if that makes sense.
Now, let me ask you this. As a person who is living in Japan, buying streaming services and stuff like that, where do you rank Unext? Like next to like Abema, to Netflix, to Hulu, whatever,
Well, I don't think it's as high as those because, I mean, if you watch, because whenever you see like a Japanese TV program, they always tell you like who's sponsoring the program.
Right.
And Netflix has been sponsoring a ton of stuff recently. I've seen their name all over NHK. So Netflix is making a real strong push in the Japanese market.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't see that. I mean, Hulu's there, but I think Disney Plus, who owns Hulu, is probably more popular.
Now, is Hulu more popular than Unext?
In my world, it is. That's just because my wife likes to watch The Walking Dead.
Yeah, I was just going to say that because to me, Unext does air a HBO series and Showtime series out there,
It seems to me it's more. It'd probably be people younger than myself because it does a lot of concerts and live events. Yeah.
Okay. So it's more live events and concerts, like music.
Right, that's the impression I have. Mm-hmm.
Now, is like another sporting event they air, like besides MMA?
Ooh, I don't know about that actually.
All right, so because Unext is not really like popular among the general public of Japan, right? Because I don't have any friends who lives out there who actually subscribes to Unext, and this was the first time they actually either subscribe to try free trials or whatever, Well,
it's kind of what makes, because one of the ways that characterize this event is kind of saying they tried a lot of stuff that they wouldn't normally try on a different, bigger pay-per-view card.
Mm-hmm.
And them partnering up with kind of a smaller streaming company is kind of an interesting choice.
Yeah, it is an interesting choice. Do you think they got a better deal than like the regular stream company? Like traditionally they divide like 50-50, right? Between the promotions and so maybe
they might have got a better deal, or they might have just got more attention and better service. Because if they're the biggest fish in Unext ponds now, now they can start making. Maybe they want a bigger cut next time. Maybe they renegotiate
Exactly.
the contract.
And if I were Sakakibara, because I just watched his post-fight press conference, and he has mentioned a couple of very interesting things. One, he's already defending Unext because he's already saying that this is not one mistake you're out kind of stuff. We got to figure out the resolve. What was the problem, and we may go ahead. Right. On top of that, I think he mentioned something like it was big numbers sold, but it was not as quite as the Dynamite pay-per-view, which was one of the biggest selling pay-per-view records set back in Sky Perfect TV. So
yeah, but you got to take that into consideration because Sky Perfect TV is an established streaming service that everybody knows about.
And but I mean, Sakakibara also mentioned as a comparison, like Mayweather fights, where they're selling like a million pay-per-views and blah blah blah, and he sort of mentioned that they're like 10 times more, meaning maybe they only sold maybe 100K, but still that was the biggest one in Unext. Maybe I don't know. I'm just only guessing.
Well, it's interesting because I always like the idea of tying yourself to an upstart. Because then RIZIN becomes the premier program on Unext.
Oh yeah, right.
And it gets all of their promotional attention. Plus,
I mean, pretty much. I think Unext got the biggest exposure period. I think from this.
Right.
No. Yeah.
Plus, a lot of the streaming services like Netflix and Hulu don't really offer live events that I'm aware of, at least in the Japanese market. So that kind of limits that as well. But I mean, back to the new stuff. I mean, they were doing some crazy stuff. They had drones flying around. Doing drone camera shots.
Right, yeah, okay.
Yeah. And I don't know how many people were there. There was not a lot of people. It was probably
I think it was like 90 in total, including staff and around 90. That's what I heard from.
I want to say like people there, it was probably less than 50 people. And I want to say that I heard a rumor that all the tickets were $2,000.
Yeah, I heard it was 2 premium fan club members.
Only them.
Yeah, and I wouldn't be surprised about $2,000 because I can reveal this right now because about a year ago, RIZIN already had the plan of doing those pay-per-view only show, no audience, and they were planning to do it right by the hood of Mount Fuji.
Right.
And it's like it's in Japanese music festival called Fuji Rock, and they wanted to kind of imitate that, and they were thinking about selling the ticket for 10K per seat.
Right.
So. Right.
Well, it was interesting. It's an interesting choice because the branding of this event is kind of interesting because there's like this mystery secret event, like where are they going to do it? And then they don't really tell you where they're going to do it. And they create this whole mystery of the event. And then afterwards, you kind of find out where it was.
Now, was it by the Tokyo Tower?
It was. It was by the Tokyo Tower in this kind of interesting studio. It's like an arena/studio that has 360-degree like screens. So they're able to play stuff on all of the walls essentially, like they're in a circle of screens.
I mean, that's interesting. Yeah, I mean, and with the
afterwards, Takada and some of the people there were taking pictures by Tokyo Tower, dropping hits to where it was.
Now you're looking at this event which has only 4 fights, which means 8 fighters on the payroll, and obviously much expenses running a show, right, in terms of operation cost wise. And if they can make a good money, like recently, this is a big new source of resources. I mean, source of income for a RIZIN now.
Well, yeah, it was interesting because it's almost like this was an event targeted towards like a younger audience. It was like a marketing test because it was sponsored by a CBD company called Weed.
Yeah,
I had like weed slapped on it. And it became like this. Sorry?
That's so funny in a way because a lot of people did not know what weed is, and they were like saying like, "Oh, what's weed?" And they say that's marijuana. But in Japan, they still make a huge deal about marijuana, right? You could get arrested so easily and stuff,
Yeah.
But anyway, go ahead. Yeah.
So they had like the weed sponsorship up there, and I think weed might be a sponsor of Hagiwara's because a lot of his videos he had their supplements with them. But so it's him and Asakura. They had all the drones, and then they had all these like the VTRs are kind of different. It's like they're trying to create their own kind of like new event series.
Yeah, and towards the younger audience is exactly right because and the specific younger audience too, in a way, more like those audience who likes the, underground culture, like hip hop, I would say like, I don't want to say this, but sort of like gangster culture, type of stuff. Because when you really look back on the Japanese culture, Japanese always loved the Yakuzas and the Yakuza movies. They even had the Yakuza magazines, following Yakuza movement and stuff. And Hagiwara's gym is called Smoker's Gym, right? I see that big, what is it, Dr. Dre or whoever that. Right, broing.
They have a very like hip hop vibe to them.
Yeah, exactly. So that's just directly towards that market.
And I'll say it was kind of interesting looking at the crowd, because I'm always kind of curious who's at these events. There were a lot of young women in the crowd. So it's kind of an interesting demographic that these events are creating.
Yeah, here's what it is. Those outsiders and all these underground MMA shows in Japan who has been criticized heavily for like last 10 years or so. The fact is this, and so this officially, they had tons of like, I wouldn't call them fighters. They're like, shit fighters there. However, obviously they have created 1, 2, 3, like decent guys or good fighters like Asakura brothers. And because they still had big fan base already, right? Because outside the field, like Ryogoku Sumo Arena and stuff like that, so they had a huge fan base to begin with, and they only have like 2, 3 stars. So of course, the entire fan follows them, So they took the entire culture and wrote it on a YouTube, right? Basically.
Well, it was also interesting because you can kind of tell who's popular at these events. And at Rising 30, Kintaro got a lot of people were yelling from him from like the crowd. Right. Kintaro got a lot of attention. And same with Hagiwara. I mean, Hagiwara is kind of tapped into this previously untapped market, probably a similar fan base to Kintaro.
And what it is though. There's one thing common about all these guys. None of these guys are considered as an elite.
Exactly.
They all went through some bad hardship in a younger age, or like ended up in like correction facilities and came back, or whatever that is, right? So it's a comeback story of guys who just didn't have a chance to go to college and stuff. Like
it's the same thing with the Asakura brothers, and it's
exactly
what they're selling is. I mean, the Asakura brothers are probably higher quality fighters, but they have like this charisma that the Japanese audience seems to be attaching to, and doesn't really care if they win or lose. They just really like their charisma and like their personalities. I
mean, those guys pretty much have an entire non-college graduate or non-high school graduate guys on their back, basically. Right? That's what it is. And in a country like Japan, which is very, very difficult to go, up on a ladder if you don't have a college degrees. Right? I mean, it's almost impossible to get a job in a corporation with a high school diploma, even to this day, right? So, so they have this big market behind them.
Plus, I think all those guys have pretty big female fan bases, which is kind of what I think might be different than some promotions in the U.S. not really experiencing that.
Right. So, it was a success. And how were the fights?
I was very happy. I mean, it started off just absolutely nuts. I mean, it could have gone terrible with the fights that they lined up. They could have lined up some boring fights, but it's actually quite the opposite.
Right.
I think Shuto Watanabe finished Naito with a Darce choke in the first round.
Yeah, I saw that.
He looked a lot more determined than he had in the past. He looked very confident as opposed to his fight with Kai. And as is typical, he kind of gave like a hilarious post-fight interview where he talked about everyone but himself. He talked about his girlfriend should be fighting in Rising and things like that.
But let me ask you this. Darce choke, is that also a magical choke? Because I thought the magical choke, what he called it, was a rear naked choke.
That's what I was laughing about. I think
it's a magical choke?
I feel like I vaguely remember him talking about some new secret choke he was working on.
Okay.
But for him, the magical choke was always the rear naked choke. At least that was my understanding of it.
Yeah, right. So it wasn't a Darce.
I think this is the only time he's ever won by a Darce choke, unless I'm mistaken.
Right, so this is like a new magical choke. Right. Here's what it is. This is a one kid, Shuto Watanabe, who really actually nobody really gave him credit because he never won the big titles in Deep Shuto Pancras. He's from Nexus, and many people sort of criticize him for being a little picky, right? On the past opponents. But now he's in RIZIN, and when you really look back, only guys he lost to is Asakura and Inoue.
Right.
And that's not that bad, right? And
not
he's
at all.
winning, so
I mean, his bet, despite, I mean, he's got over 30 fights, and it seems like his best performances are just happening.
sure. And now that this character, he doesn't sound like or talk like a fighter at all. You know?
No, he has a super high pitched voice.
Oh
And he
yeah.
kind of sounds like he's not confident at all. And he usually like cries a little bit. So it's
I mean, I
pretty
really
funny.
hate to say this. If I were a gangster, if I wanted to extort somebody, and I would pick Shuto out of anybody.
Right. And
He's that kind of character, you know?
and now the way they're promoting him, it works because they show him at his house with like his army of cats and rabbits with his girlfriend, and they're like eating sweets together. It's like the UFC would never put this in a UFC countdown video.
Oh, I know, right. Now he's asking for his girlfriend to fight for RIZIN. She's a legit fighter, right? Like he got her
Yes.
own, huh?
Mhm.
You know, and the fact the way they can't really fly in foreign fighters, I think there's a chance there for that Hikaru too.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, because Rising's kind of been, you can tell they've been leaving that door open because every time Shuto fights, there's like the Hikaru cam
Right,
where they show her reaction to the fight in the corner.
right. So the second fight was the Imanari against Kanten Takeshi, right? And they had the very like nasty ending, I would say.
Yeah, Imanari, first off, the VTR was hilarious. I think Imanari said he wants to fight for 15 more years.
I could see that. I could see him doing that. I could
He was
see
just
him
saying like a bunch of crazy stuff. But and Kasugai came out. He's from like some small town. He
Mhm.
came out with like their local product on his shoulders, dressed in like with their theme song. So my wife immediately got into it, not knowing who he was, just because of like his crazy entrance, very pro wrestling.
Yeah, exactly. He's so funny. He portrays like a typical so-called country guy,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Yeah.
And unfortunately for him, I believe he retired after this fight.
Hmm.
But unfortunately for him, Imanari showed that when he grabs a limb of yours, he usually tries to break it.
Yeah, one thing is Takeshi is actually a pretty good all-around fighter.
Right.
So he was confident. So he was probably thinking that he could handle it a little bit. He can maybe survive,
Well,
you
it was
know?
kind of one of those worst case scenarios where like he was handling it until he
Hmm.
wasn't, if that makes any sense.
Right, right,
Like
exactly.
he was in Imanari's guard. I think Imanari learned from his last fight that he spent too much time chasing the guy, and he just pulled guard pretty much immediately in this fight. And Takeshi was landing some hammer fist from guard, so I think he had
Mhm.
some confidence. But then Imanari used a omoplata to reverse it, and that's how we got to this position.
Oh, I know. And he didn't tap, so I guess Manari had no choice but to snap it, right?
Well, it was kind of like I've really never seen something like that before. He like went for this omoplata, but then he transitioned it to an armbar, and then it's like all of a sudden snapped it like very quickly. Which Imanari is not one to wait for you to tap,
Hmm.
and once he gets his chance, so I mean, it looked like the guy was in a little bit of pain. He had his arm in a cast or a sling afterwards.
You know, here's what it is. I will officially say this. If I were a matchmaker for any major promotion, I don't care UFC, belt, or anything. I don't care. He's 45. That's the one guy that I don't mind giving a contract to.
Oh
I
no!
mean, don't you love to see a guy like that in any? And
Well, it's also he has like this unique fighting style where I know he jokes that he says he wants to fight for 15 more years, and that might be
Mhm.
crazy, but he still has some fights left in him because what he got hit maybe with 2 or 3 hammer fists this fight,
Right.
took no strikes standing. So I mean,
Mhm.
his style allows him to have a long career.
Exactly. But he did reveal that on a past fight against Takizawa, he did take a first shot on the very beginning of the fight. He almost
Mhm.
lost it there. So he felt that he was lucky that Takizawa didn't chase him, you know?
That's what's always nice about Imanari is like insanely direct, but you have to counter that with the fact that is he like serious? Like you get the impression that half the time he's joking.
You know, he's hard to tell if he's serious or not serious. He's that kind of guy,
Yeah.
you know? But
But I
again,
mean,
very interesting guy, you know?
this couldn't
Intriguing.
have gone better for Rising because first fight, first round finish.
Mm,
Second fight, first round finish.
right. And
After the
not only
Rising 30, which had only one finish, I believe.
that, exactly.
Yeah,
But not only that, and again, I don't mean to be cruel here, but he snapped the guy's arm, which shows
yeah,
you another aspect of MMA, right? I mean, which could
exactly.
excite the new fans or Well, it's a shock value, which always sells to the younger audience.
Yeah.
Then the third fight, I mean, I thought this show was great too. Now, third fight is this guy. People call him what, like Kaibutsu-kun, which means Mr.
Yes.
Monster?
Yes.
Yes. And here's
he is I believe it'd be fair to call him the striking coach at Bonsai Jiu-Jitsu.
Yes.
With their team.
Mm-hmm.
He was a staple of shoot boxing for years.
Right.
And then he went over to, did he go to one championship, I believe, and now he's back.
Right, Suzuki. Right. He's fought many times in shoot boxing. For those, listeners who doesn't know shoot boxing, that's a Japanese kickboxing, but has a special rules which allows you to throw opponent or apply a standing submission.
Yes.
Yeah.
And his whole gimmick has always been that he's just absolutely shredded.
Mm-hmm.
Like, he's extremely muscular. He works out with Shrek. I'm sure they don't do any supplements. They both naturally at 37 years old are absolutely shredded. But he made his MMA debut in this fight against Okuda, who's a pro wrestler. And it's kind of an interesting fight. I feel like Okuda must have some wrestling skills.
He does, actually. He placed like 9th in the world championships. And in his college, Genki Sudo was his coach, actually.
Ah, okay. That's okay. Yeah. That makes sense that you say that now, because he was legitimately going for takedowns. They weren't. Right. This wasn't like the typical pro wrestler who has no idea what he's doing. He was legitimately going for takedowns. And so that explains why Suzuki was kind of hesitant. But once Suzuki hit him with I believe a knee or a high kick, it was just over. He got it to the ground and just ground and pounded it out.
Well, but again, it's still hard to kind of determine how he's,
it means nothing. Like the way assessing his MMA abilities, it means nothing. But he's 37 years old, I believe.
Yeah, he's old. Up there, right?
So this puts Suzuki in kind of a category of, let's get some fun fights out of him.
Yeah, but I think he's thinking about going down to 145 after this. I think from the
really?
Yeah, that's what I'm hearing. And this was the first time he fought in over a year and 10 months or something, because he had to. I guess maybe he sat out the one championships during the exclusive negotiation period and the matching period. Maybe that's why it took him so long to get out. I don't know, but so
I know that he started a family. I think he started a family somewhat recently as well.
Oh, really? Okay.
Interesting.
Yeah, so he's another character, and I think it's an interesting addition to the featherweight if you're going down to the featherweight,
Yeah, and I think he's. I mean, we don't know how shoot boxing is kind of interesting in that if he was training full shoot boxing, that kind of gives him a little bit more of an edge than your average kickboxer.
Oh yeah, of course. Right. And obviously, he's been training with the Bonsai Jiu-Jitsu, so he's more exposed to the MMA training, right? Obviously.
Right. So it'll be interesting to see what they do with him. If they try to give him just like kind of fun, exciting fights, or if they make him a legitimate contender.
Right. Now, then it comes to the main event, which is the fourth fight of the evening. It's probably took them like total fight time less than 10 minutes to get there, maybe. Yeah.
Roughly that. Yeah.
Yeah. And here comes Kyohei Hagiwara, who has like pretty much like 50 record, right? Sub 50. Oh,
does now.
Right. And he's from the underground MMA circuit, and but for some reason made it to RIZIN, after
he's
maybe
they're heavily tattooed fighters who I believe is he from the Osaka region.
But here's what it is, though. Like we talked about, I think maybe him and even a guy like one of our clients, Ren Hiramoto, those guys has this specific market may be suitable for this RIZIN Landmark.
Oh, they do. I mean, Hagiwara has it's interesting because Kentaro Hiramoto, they have like kind of a unique fan base that doesn't have overlap with other fighters.
Yeah, it doesn't, right.
So
and here's what it is. The interesting about it is like Mikuru is like a YouTube and he uses social network very well and stuff like that. But Hagiwara, he doesn't really use social network. I don't see him doing too many Twitters or Instagram. It's just once in a while. It's not like he's really doing YouTubes,
Well, he's clever because, I mean, even in the pre-fight, they did this thing where, probably to buy time, they were interviewing the fighters backstage before the event.
Yeah.
And they're asking Mikuru questions, and then Hagiwara, and like Hagiwara was kind of making fun of Mikuru because Mikuru would say something, then Hagiwara would just say the same thing. So I mean, he kind of has like this charismatic kind of rebel attitude, is what I would call it. And I think a lot of young people like the guy that kind of sticks it to the man.
Now, I'm hearing the two voices, like two different voices from the fans. One fan says that, oh, Mikuru is very smart. His fight IQ is up there. Didn't take a chance, played on the ground where he's superior than Hagiwara. The another voice is that, I'm disappointed that he should have just go for the knockout. And the guy is, just a 500 fighter. Why can't you finish him?
So I've noticed as well. I think my wife's a Mikuru fan and a Hagiwara fan, and she kind of wanted to see a striking affair. But apparently, Mikuru had made comments before the fight that this is what he was going to do, and he said he was kind of going to do what Hagiwara did to Hiramoto to Hagiwara.
Yeah.
And you got to think, Asakura's coming off of a loss, a very big loss at the Tokyo Dome.
Yep.
He needs a win. And Hagiwara's really only chance to win this fight is if it's a brawl. So I think he did the smart thing, and he made it not a brawl.
Exactly. He took that possibility out of the game, right? Basically.
And he revealed that Hagiwara's grappling skills are absolutely awful.
Yeah.
The takedowns weren't even takedowns. He just kind of would rush forward and push him over.
Right.
And Hagiwara just followed him out.
It's not like Mikuru has a real good ground control technique. He basically used his physical, basically, to put him down, right?
Yeah, he would wait for Hagiwara to be off balance, then rush forward, grab a leg, and push him down. It wasn't like he was going for singles or doubles or body locks. It was just kind of tripping him to the ground. So it told me very little. I think Mikuru wanted to show, yes, I've been working on my grappling game. I know that I lost to Kleber, but he's really high level grappler. I can also grapple. But this match didn't really tell me any of that. It really just told me that Hagiwara doesn't know how to get up or defend a takedown.
Right. I mean, every top grappler has said the same thing, which is there's no shortcuts in grappling.
No.
You don't get better in like half a year or a couple, whatever. Right? You don't catch up that fast. I mean, especially in a grappling rules match. And but here's what it is. Did you hear what Shinya Aoki and Kyoji Horiguchi said about this Mikuru's grappling skill?
What did they say?
Well, Aoki first, of course, he's a pro wrestler / MMA fighter, so he's always thinking marketing here. But
probably said something outlandish.
Yeah, he said basically that his grappling skill is not good at all. He's maybe a notch above Ren Hiramoto level. A notch above. And this is the opponent that he could have finished, but he didn't. But he did something. He said something same as what he just said, that if he loses this fight, this will be a 2 fights losing streak. Yeah. So he didn't want to take a chance, and he's kind of chicken for not taking that chance. And he, of course, at the end added that if he wants to be a fighter who could fight in a world class level, come to me. I'll teach you the grappling. Come to Aoki Factory, Akasaka branch kind of stuff. So he's half pro wrestling thing, but he's got a good points there.
Yeah, no, I mean, Aoki, normally what Aoki says has like a hint, like a ring of truth to it. And it's usually just like exaggerated or said in some crazy way.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, it's just one of those things where him showing the grappling he showed in this match doesn't tell me he's a good grappler. It just tells me he's a better grappler than Hagiwara. He's a street fighter from the outside.
Right. So he's a little bit better. That's it. It doesn't mean he could compete against Kleber, Koike, or anybody who almost, any top grapplers, pretty much. Not yet. And also, Aoki and both Kyoji pointed out, Horiguchi said, I think it was Asakura Aoki said that Asakura got to kill his back, right? And you have to be able to finish it from there, is exactly what Aoki said. The fact that he couldn't finish Hagiwara from that position, it tells you that his grappling skill is not there yet.
Yeah, he was kind of going for this, I mean, in the third round, his ground and pound started to look good, but it's kind of a little late. I would have liked to have seen him open up with the ground and pound a little earlier.
Right.
But yeah, it was kind of unfortunate too, because leading into the fight was 3 very exciting finishes, and then there was more kind of like the slow pace. But that's to happen because that could kind of be expected because they're both very similar strikers.
Right, and actually, in a way, in the 4 fights, RIZIN got to show to the new audience a different kind of MMA fights, though, right? I mean,
yeah, they got the decision, a knockout, and 2 submissions.
Right, and one snapping arms, I must assume, because that kind of thing gives you really an impression to the new viewers, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Right, so I guess this was a success, even though they had to pay back some of the,
I'll say this whole thing just reeks of this being somewhat Mikuru's idea to me. I don't know the behind the scenes, but on his YouTube channel, he started those 1-minute fights. And this just seems so similar to those 1-minute fights where he's saying people have short attention spans these days.
Yeah.
Let's give them an event with only 4 fights on it.
Right.
And you have to think that part of his motivation for doing this was, let's see how many pay-per-views I can essentially sell by myself.
Exactly. You know what? Here's what it is. He sort of became a one-man media in Japan, like, and sort of like Connor, right? In terms of like a power to sell pay-per-views. But the big difference from Connor is like he's not contracted to a very strict contract like the UFC, which means in a year or two, he doesn't need a RIZIN. He could just do his own event and make a lot of money.
He could do his own events like this. And also, it seems to be, I don't think people really care that much who he's fighting.
Exactly. That's exactly what. Yeah, but this time I think Koike was a good match.
No,
right?
I'll say that's not true because that's not true for this event because Hagiwara is very popular.
Right.
But I will say overall, I don't think people really care that much.
And he could
the caliber of his opponent.
Right. He could expect decent numbers even though against almost nobody. Right. Right.
So he can use his YouTube channel to build the person up and then fight them.
So he has these tools to build it up and sell the pay-per-view. So soon he will not need any RIZIN's help to do his own show. All he needs is like a broadcasting or streaming partner, which could be next to ABEMA, or he can do it on his own, right?
Or he could do something where he still fights for RIZIN, but he's allowed to do his own events on the side.
Something like that, right? That would be very smart because he could use Fuji Television, which is terrestrial broadcasting, to addition to his social network, right?
Right.
So he's really sitting in a very good spot.
I mean, he's by far the most popular Japanese YouTuber that's a fighter, not in general, but I mean, if you look at how he's living and how his YouTube associates are living, they're doing very well. He's figured something out.
Yeah, and here's what it is. That's why I always say this, that Asakura Brothers should be marketed like a Hickson and Hoyce. Kai should go out there and fight top guys. No, Asakura just should do the money fights. We'll create that's serious. And it's not bad if the Kai win. That doesn't matter. It's okay. It still gives you a story of a challenge, and it gives Well,
it's kind of interesting. It's kind of like, do you think it's because of outsiders that outsiders kind of created this interesting environment where it doesn't really matter if they win or not? It's just like who's the most badass or who's the toughest.
Yeah, I think so in a way. Because have you seen most of the outsider fight? It's terrible. It's it's worse than
like low-level Yakuza and people fighting each other.
And the fact is, it doesn't matter who win or lose because the guy who loses terribly ended up being one of the most popular guys because he's just one of the head of some motorcycle gang, and he was willing to step into the cage, and people just love about that idea itself,
Oh, yeah.
So this is a new trend in the Japanese MMA. It's not necessarily a competition-oriented point of view, right? Right. That's why, in a way, I think the fact that Kai is going up against my client Naoki, who is probably polar opposite in a way, because Naoki's never got into trouble, right? He's trained MMA from first grade, grew up in a regular, middle-income household, So it's totally different.
Well, I will say, in Kai's defense, I think Mikuru is probably more the one that had more trouble.
I think so.
Kai was actually.
Kai didn't really get into trouble. I heard that, yeah. And I heard that Kai was. People tell me he was like in sumo or something, but that he really didn't start martial arts training till he's 19.
Right.
In high school, he was in some other volleyball or some other sports or something, right?
Right.
Yeah, just
that
because
makes sense. I haven't heard anything.
Women, he thought she was beautiful, whatever, So, right. So he's different from Mikuru, right? In a way.
Yeah. It is kind of interesting though that all these fighters. I think somebody mentioned it. I forget who, that the region of Toyohashi seems to be a hotbed for MMA fighters in Japan.
Oh, I know. I mean, Mizuki, Naoki, Naosaka brothers, Suzuki, Hiroaki, from Shoot Boxing, and
that's the one who said. I think Suzuki was the one when they introduced him in the ring.
Hey,
was talking about how.
That. I think did he ever talk about Emi Fujino is also from Toyohashi?
I did not know that. Yeah,
I mean, Emi Fujino,
add another one.
Yeah, actually, Emi Fujino's parents owns pachinko chains. So, right.
That sounds like a profitable. If people aren't familiar, pachinko is like Japanese slot machine gambling.
Exactly.
There are lines wrapped around those places.
Oh,
the places are so popular.
Big time. Now, so let's talk about this RIZIN 31 that they announced.
Yes.
Also 32, which is in Okinawa.
I think they're also set to make some announcements today.
Okay, yeah.
They're announcing some
fights.
Probably
announcing opponents of Saito, right?
Yes, I believe so. Probably.
I could have called and find out, but I didn't. I was just too busy dealing with my new son.
Yeah, I can't imagine how busy you are.
So anyway, so here's what it is. So they're gonna put Saito on the middle of the poster. He's the only figure on the poster, right, for this new RIZIN 31 show. So they're giving him that major spot. Now they don't have an opponent, but it looks like it's going to be Juntaro Ushiku, the deep current champion, correct?
Correct.
Yeah. I mean, is this going to be fans there?
I'll say that amongst the hardcore fans,
okay,
the people that follow RIZIN actively, Saito has become popular.
He does. Right.
Saito has become popular because of his wins. I think his last fight was kind of interesting because he fought the guy, Musayev's friend. What was his name? Volgar.
Yeah.
And I think people kind of felt bad for Saito because of all the fouls, and they kind of liked the way he responded to just ignoring it. But Japan's always liked the fighter that beats the foreign fighter, and so they like him. And so I'd say, but I just don't think he has the casual fan base that some of the other champions have.
Right. Even though the win over Mikuru, he didn't get that for some reason.
Yeah, he doesn't. You don't get that with the Asakura brothers. You don't seem to get that rub.
No.
And so, to me, it's kind of a weak main event for a main event. But if it's a smaller event, which I believe it is, and it's in between two big events, it kind of makes sense.
Right, but still, I mean, it's a PR arena, so it's about 10,000 people, but they're gonna put only 5,000 this time again. Is that what it is? Because
I don't know, because a lot of the COVID restrictions are being lifted. We're allowed to drink again.
Oh, that's good. I'm happy for you guys. Yeah,
we're allowed to drink outside again. So yeah, so I think Tokyo's down to just a couple hundred people a day, and they may be able to do this without restrictions.
So they could pack up to 10,000 people, but I think I have to.
This card, I don't think this card sells 10,000.
No, I think it's a very weak card, unless if they add something that more. I mean, are they going to add a couple?
They've already announced the prices, and the prices are the same as the COVID prices.
Okay.
And I mean, if the cheapest tickets are going to be $100, I don't see this selling 10,000.
Okay. Well, here's what it is. I'm hearing. I mean, I think this is already everybody talked about, but Sakakibara wanted to have Saito fighting Kleber Koike for this show.
Very publicly, yes. And he's very upset with Kleber Koike. He's claimed that he's kind of faking an injury because he wants to fight on the New Year's Eve card.
Right, but I think Sakakibara already publicly said that he's not going to offer Kleber a fight in New Year's Eve.
Right, which is kind of an interesting fight that is happening. Because while Kleber himself isn't insanely popular, people know who he is, and they know he's a good fighter, and he's associated with other popular fighters. So it seems like an interesting feud. So you kind of wonder what's happening behind the scenes.
Right, but also I think Sakakibara kind of mentioned that if Saito wins this October in RIZIN 31, I think a rematch between him and Mikuru in New Year's Eve.
So that makes sense because Koike, I think MMA fans like Koike, but he doesn't have that casual draw in Japan.
No, it's not like it's necessary. right?
Right. He's not going to boost the Fuji TV ratings by putting him on.
And actually,
But
I think Mikuru versus Saito might even do better for Fuji.
it'd do way better.
Yeah.
Putting Mikuru's name in anything makes it better than someone else's. So
Right. So the point is, I think it's almost a done deal in the sense that Sakakibara will not offer Kleber a fight, and he even revealed that Kleber is no longer under a RIZIN contract.
so that was my interesting thing was I would imagine some of the hesitation
Mm-hmm.
is that Rising is trying to battle this stigma that their champions all leave.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Koike has, correct me if I'm wrong, I think Koike, unlike Satoshi, has kind of hinted that he would like to fight for other promotions.
He kind of hinted it, but I did hear from multiple sources that his management is not talking to the other promotion, which doesn't make sense.
Okay.
He should. I mean, they should. I mean, just to test his market value.
Right.
Right.
But I know Satoshi is very publicly stated he just doesn't, he wants to fight in Ryzen.
Exactly.
He'd rather be the big fish in a small pond.
Here's what it is, though, especially not for only Japanese, but for any actually promoters in the world. That's actually a good tactic, too, if you really have no intention to go anywhere else. So if I were Kleber's management, if Kleber has zero intention of going to another promotions, I would be much better to play the card and says, hey, listen, I like RIZIN, I'm going to stay there for long term, but pay me well. And if I beat this guy Mikuru, who is making, X amount of dollars, then you're going to have to pay me the same amount if I beat him kind of stuff, you just have to talk to him nicely and we'll just commit long term.
Right.
Yeah.
But my thought was that they just don't want to have I think they like having a Japanese champion.
Mm-hmm.
B, I don't think they want to risk a guy out of contract fighting and pulling a Ham Seo Hee.
Exactly right.
Someone else offering me more money.
Right.
Bye bye. So I think it's a mixture of factors like that.
Here's what it is. I mean, even like let's say UFC, if you were doing title fight, they ask you to sign longer contract, and same with Bellator. If you became a champion, you have a championship clause which will extend your number of fights on your contract and stuff. So it's all common sense for a so-called quote-unquote major promotion who is dealing on the major networks and stuff.
Aside from Ham Seo Hee, the bigger news would be the more recent Horiguchi. And Rising has done their best to try to control that narrative to be like, oh, he's fighting for Bellator, but he's also going to fight for Rising.
Mm-hmm.
Where I see them saying that, but when I think about it practically, it's just like, that's going to be impossible. If he becomes a Bellator champion, Bellator is going to make him defend the title. They don't want him going off and fighting and Rising every 3 months.
Yeah, of course. and think about it, if they do a bantamweight Grand Prix, and if you're going to pay the winner $1 million prize, right? I mean, that's an investment you put it on the fighter, so you don't want him to take that risk,
So when they say that he's going to fight for Rising, my thought process is, he'll fight for Rising when Bellator comes to Japan and they co-promote.
Right. Now, then what would happen to the Grand Prix winner, right? I mean...
Yeah, because the whole thing was the Grand Prix runner is supposed to fight Horiguchi.
Right, but if they're doing the Grand Prix next year, that ain't going to happen. So another possibility would be maybe Bellator will offer this Grand Prix winner a spot in the... Bellator.
Or you could just see them kind of recorrect the narrative and stop mentioning that the winner of the Grand Prix is supposed to fight Horiguchi.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of sweep it under the rug.
Here's what it is. I'm a Naoki's manager, so of course I want him to fight Kai and win and get more values up and blah blah blah. But if I were RIZIN promoter, if I were Sakakibara, first perfect scenario would be Takizawa and Kai will do a real good battle, and Kai wins it, but In gets injured, so he doesn't go to the final. Naoki beats Ogikubo, goes to the final, and you end up fighting Takizawa. So if Naoki wins, right, then still only beating Takizawa, so Kai doesn't lose any value. So he could be the next Grand Prix champion, and they could be fighting Kai Asakura, who could be for the RIZIN title, because that could be a vacant at that point.
Yeah.
I mean something like that, right?
We should mention, I forgot to mention this, and it was on there. The Landmark show, Imanari and Watanabe were in reserve bouts for the tournament. And so I think it's all but a done deal that Imanari will fight Shuto Watanabe on the New Year's Eve card as the reserve bout for the tournament.
I wouldn't be surprised, right?
Because, I'm sorry to cut you off, but I just wanted to mention that while I was thinking of
it. Right. So, I mean, so this is going to be interesting. And also, RIZIN has announced another show in Okinawa, November 20th.
Right, which is kind of interesting. As soon as that was announced, everyone was trying to think of all the Okinawan fighters they could who would possibly appear on the card.
Right, but here's what it is. I mean, one person everybody would talk about is Tatsuro Taira, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, but here's what it is. I forgot to mention to you this. We should talk about this real quickly. That the Shuto has announced that Vale Tudo Japan.
I wanted to talk to you about that. Actually, I had that on my list.
Exactly. And that Vale Tudo Japan promotion video, they have showed the footage of Taira or Sasuke or even Okami and stuff like that in there. Yeah.
As a fan, I will say that I wasn't watching it back when the first Vale Tudo Japan happened. Obviously, I wasn't like watching bootleg VHS tapes. But when they had kind of their the new Vale Tudo Japan back around 2010, I thought it was a great promotion.
It is.
They
it's a good show.
They put on amazing fights. I mean, they had Horiguchi, they had Kana Asakura, they had Megumi Fuji, they had all sorts of great stuff. And it's kind of sad when it went away. But for those that don't know, and you could probably reflect on this, Vale Tudo Japan was kind of an offshoot of Shuto, correct?
Right.
And now, I believe, from what I've been reading, is it going to be on a BEMA TV?
Yeah, it is going to be a BEMA TV. Just to add, actually, to the Jiu-Jitsu fans out there, to the Vale Tudo Japan is basically a show. It's created as like an offshoot of a Shuto, as to bring in Rickson Gracie.
Right.
Rickson fought on the first 3 shows, right, on the Vale Tudo. And Vale Tudo Japan became a legendary show because I think most of the Jiu-Jitsu guy knows about the story between Yuki Nakai and Gerard Gordeau fight. Where Gordeau,
there's a famous documentary made about it, I believe.
Exactly, and Nakai lost his eyesight. Right, that's a very, very hard, harsh story there. But so that's and Rickson won the Vale Tudo tournament, and on top of that, for the American UFC fan, this is a show where Mr. Ensa Inoue has submitted Randy Couture in like less than 2 minutes.
Yeah.
So they had a lot of interesting fights on this Vale Tudo Japan show.
Oh, and as far as women's fights go, my favorite fight of all time still is Megumi Fuji versus Vivi May.
Oh, yeah.
Which happened in Vale Tudo Japan. It's one of the best fights ever. They went at it back and forth. So, I mean, and I believe when Vale Tudo Japan had their kind of like 2010 rebirth, I think Megumi Fuji was actually helping them with their matchmaking.
Yes, I think so. And they wanted to do Megumi against Jessica Aguilar, right?
Right.
That type of stuff. So, yeah, she was one of the biggest draw for Shuto back then. So,
yeah, so I'm glad to see him back because personally, I think Shuto's kind of shaky these days.
Very shaky.
And I would like to see them put their efforts kind of like as like a relaunch with VTJ.
Yeah, because obviously Shuto is shaky and they're almost sort of under the one championship. They got a big one championship logo on the canvas and everywhere else on the venue.
I know people get upset when we're critical of Shuto. I will say Shuto has an amazing like amateur system.
They do
a really good job of finding talent.
Yes.
But as a professional like promotion, they're like lacking a little bit. So I'm hoping that they can pool their resources and really make this like it was back in the 2010s.
Right. So Vale Tudo Japan is going to be on a BEMA TV, and it's going to be at the Studio Coast, which is not a big venue. So again, it's more towards the online audience, right? So, but like I said, BEMA TV is a big player in Japan now. So that's a huge backup that Vale Tudo Japan has.
The Studio Coast where Pancrase has their event?
Yeah, they did, right. So that's the same show, the same venue, right.
All right. Well, that venue is closing by 2022. So maybe that's just their first event.
Exactly. And I think they're planning on something a little bit more bigger next year,
Yeah. It's a cool venue. So it'll be cool. I like the disco ball. So it'll be fun to see them there. But
exactly. So the Japanese MMA is very active in November, right? You got the end of October is a RIZIN and another RIZIN show in November, right? In Okinawa.
Yeah.
Okinawa is at the arena where they host like 10,000 people too.
Right. My wife's first yelled out, Nisei is going to be on it. One of the Deep Jewels fighters is like a very proud Okinawan She fishes with her father. But so we're jumping all around. But on the Okinawa card, I kind of expected to be like one of their more regional cards, kind of like the Nagoya cards,
Right.
where you see a lot of the names and you may not be familiar with them, and with one or two known people fighting in the main and co-main event. What do you think?
Well, I heard that they do have a little bit of a limited budget compared to the Tokyo shows, obviously, right?
Yeah,
And then they were looking to book some of the talent from Okinawa, but I'm hearing that I don't think Taira is going to be able to fight on that show. So
yeah,
I don't know what is going to happen, to tell the truth, because they got to figure out the main event first. That's what they
right.
always do. They figure out some main event and they build the whole entire cars around it.
Yeah,
So, like Saito's case, they got the main event, but what's going to
they
happen
got
to the
screwed.
Okinawa show, right? So,
Yeah, interesting. I thought it was kind of interesting that Saito is the cover poster for the event.
yeah, I
This
know.
kind of shows that they're investing a lot in Saito because, based off my experience, Kana Asakura is way more popular than him.
I was just going to say that. I wonder why they did not push Kana out there. Kana Sakura is more popular, and she's
And
young,
like,
and there's more
but
way to
it's
build
like
her too.
not just saying that she's like way more popular. Like they're not even in the same ballpark. She's one of the more popular fighters in Rising. Like so, and by all of the metrics that Sakakibara cares about, she's
Right.
popular on YouTube. She's popular on social media. She has a TikTok sponsorship. So
Now, speaking of popular, I want to say popular, but big followers on the social network, our favorite, Miss Rin Nakai. Now, she finally got the fight.
this, okay. So let's rewind a little bit.
Okay.
Rin Nakai, when she first started using social media,
Uh-huh.
one of the big things she did was she came to Tokyo to train. And she went and trained with Erika Kamimura, and she went and trained, I believe, at Tenshin Nasukawa's gym.
Mhm.
And then she made like a random day trip to Nagoya to watch a Heat show.
Yep.
Well, now it all makes sense because now she's fighting for Heat. And it makes, while that makes sense on how they met and how this is happening, the fact that she's fighting for Heat makes zero sense. It makes her seem like it's schizophrenic, like based off of what she's been saying. Like, I want to fight for the UFC. I want to fight for Invicta. I want to fight for Bellator. But now I'd rather fight for one of the smallest promotions in Japan
I know,
in
and the
not
mixed rules,
Tokyo or Yokohama,
right? And the mixed rules, you know,
which is an interesting because to
2 round
me,
fight.
if you want to fight abroad, you need to start putting MMA fights together. This fight won't be an MMA
Obviously,
fight,
right?
so it won't affect your record.
Zero.
And so to me, it's only like lose lose. Like if you win, if you win, it's good, but it doesn't do anything permanent. And if you lose, it's devastating. So I will say though, I posted some stuff about this fight,
Uh-huh.
and it's gotten way more reaction than any other fight announcement recently.
What was
So
the
Rin
reaction?
Nakai has a giant fan base that she somehow needs to tap into.
I mean, like, is people positive about this?
I think she has a lot of foreign fans who I think just want to see her do whatever, anything. It's like people are like desperate; they're jonesing for Rin Nakai. It's like as long as you do anything, we'll be happy. As long as you're just not doing for the past 2 years or just sitting in your gym doing nothing, this is better than that, I guess.
Now, here's what it is. I'm not going to reveal names and stuff like that. I know for the fact that Usami's, husband slash trainer, Mr. Usami, we call it Wild
Hmm.
Usami. He calls the shots and he talks to the promoters and matchmakers, stuff like that.
Hmm.
And I heard he once requested to this promoter that, all right, why don't you do a 125-pound tournament? Then my girl Lin will fight. The promoter goes, okay, all right, let's do this, right? And he started calling people, started like planning. About a couple of weeks later, Wild called and said, hey, listen, what if I get a call from UFC? Can I just scratch from tournament? Doesn't have to finish the whole thing. Forget it. Can I just leave it? So the promoter got mad. I'm like, this is your goddamn idea, And now you
Yeah,
think,
but
he's crazy in that sense,
what these promoters, what they need is someone like me who just knows that the UFC is never going to call.
Exactly.
And so I'd just be like, yeah, Usami, if the UFC calls and wants her to come up, help yourself. We're more than welcome to let her go fight for the UFC if that offer comes.
And two, this is a funny thing, and another promoter told me that Mr. Usami has mentioned that he can only take fight on 2 weeks' notice because he has to always wait till what if UFC calls?
That's so insane.
That
actually makes sense because of when this is scheduled. Okay.
And the bottom line, I think somebody needs to explain to him that 2 weeks won't cut it in terms of making a visa applications and you get approval for your P1 visa and stuff like that. So if you have like maybe 3-4 weeks, that's it. So.
I won't say who told me this, but over the weekend I went and I was training. My wife and I went and trained at an MMA gym, and we were talking to one of the professional fighters, and they told us that Deep has reached out to Rin Nakai so many times.
So many times, yeah.
They said,
yes,
like it's a crazy amount of times.
Oh yeah,
like the fact that she isn't fighting is absolutely insane. They said, like they said like an exhaustedly, like we reach out to them all the time.
All the time, yes.
And they also kind of joked about, how Deep used to have that gym in Tokyo?
Yeah, Okubo, right. They had the gym.
Yeah. They had like this official Deep gym, and they did a lot of their business, their weigh-ins and stuff there. I think Shin Aoki taught jiu-jitsu classes there. But
yes, Imanari was teaching there too.
They talked about meeting Rin Nakai and Usami-san. And the next day, everybody was just making jokes about Usami-san. Like they were just like, this guy's absolutely nuts. He has like crazy eyes. Like he looks at you like you're a crazy person.
Yeah, I know. I mean, you tell by his photos.
And then they said that when Rin Nakai was talking, you'd ask like simple questions, and he would like give her permission, or he would tell her what to say.
Exactly. Right.
Right. Here's the crazy story. They talked about training with Rin Nakai, and Rin Nakai like wouldn't stop training when the bell rang. Like Usami would have to tell her to stop.
So it's not the bell; it's all Usami.
Yeah, it's just like, what insane level of control does Usami have over Rin Nakai? Yeah, but I mean, it's weird of a fight. This is the weirdest choice. Like winning a mixed rules fight in heat isn't going to get the UFC's attention. No. It isn't going to get anybody's attention except the fans. But on the other side, it's just like, thank God she's finally doing something.
Oh yeah, I know, and a very short notice fight, right? Obviously.
Also, this can't be about the money because there's no way Heat has giant pockets.
No. I mean, they have a decent pocket though, because they were able to book some foreign fighters and in top, big name like Satoshi Ishii. He wouldn't fight for cheap,
Yeah, but I mean, it's not like they dwarf Pancrase has to have more money than Heat,
right? And RIZIN would pay more, for sure.
Yeah, so I'm just like, what the hell is? What my theory is that they have some connection with Heat. She went up there as a private guest and sat front row and watched the show. And I bet Heat has just courted her, and they've treated Usami with a bunch of respect. They're like, you're very wise. You're a very good manager. We'll do whatever you want. And that's why she's fighting there.
Yeah, I think you're almost right, because Usami did suggest a couple opponents, potential opponents to Heat. And all these names that Usami has mentioned to Heat were the names that the Deep Jewels Mr. Saiki has offered in the past. So I'm like, that's really bad, actually, when I look at it. It's just not the right way to do business.
He's not doing business. If they're fighting once every 2 years, they're not doing business. And my thing is that Deep Jewels is doing a 125-pound tournament.
Yes, next year, right.
Apparently they've made offers to Rin Nakai for years, nonstop. And I don't know if like they're getting lost in the email, like Usami said in the past. But I would start, if I was them, now that Rin Nakai is on Twitter, I would start publicly making these announcements like, tournament, Rin Nakai hopeful to attend. Like, we're hopeful that Rin Nakai takes part. And I would just say it in Gong magazine. I would say it on all of our social media accounts. Every interview about the tournament. Just like, yeah, we're hoping Rin Nakai takes part.
You know what, Charlie? I don't know if you're familiar with the Japanese pro wrestling history, but that's what exactly UWF International did back then. Nobu Takada challenged all these top fighters from different promotions, publicly offer them money and all kinds of stuff, right?
So people don't realize, or that maybe they do, is a lot of these Japanese promotions used to not want their fighters to fight these good fighters in other promotions because they were marketing their person as the best person.
Right.
And if their person lost, all of a sudden they weren't able to market that.
Right.
And a good example of this was in the kickboxing world. There's a really good girl named Saya Ito. And there's this other girl named Little Tiger who fights for one championship now, who actually got her nickname from the pro wrestler, Tiger Mask. And that fight wasn't happening. Like, it just wasn't happening. They didn't want Little Tiger to lose. So Saya Ito started showing up to her press conference events and just being like, "Why don't you fight me?" Like, and it would get more attention than the actual fight did.
Right.
Then the fight ended up finally happening. And I think that Deep should just reverse roles and become the fighter calling it's like the first time ever the promotion will be calling the fighter out.
That would be
like, "Why aren't you fighting? We've offered you 200 contracts."
Right, but here's what it is. It's so funny. I wouldn't say funny, but I feel bad for Saeki. But anything he does, there's always one batch of people in the industry who criticize him. Right? Remember, that's why he had to quit Twitter and everything else.
Well, first off, Japanese Twitter, I don't know if this is just MMA in general, but Japanese fans just love to criticize, apparently.
Oh, yeah.
And Saeki, one of the more redeemable qualities about Saeki is he'll just say anything.
Right.
And so, while most promoters are extremely reserved, he just says pretty much anything.
He's more vocal, right? Obviously,
Yeah.
Right.
I think he understands that pretty much any press is good press, with obvious exceptions.
Right. So he should be doing that. But again, he doesn't want to be criticized by being a bully against them, I guess, maybe,
No, I wouldn't be a bully. I'd be like, "Oh, we just really feel bad that Rin Nakai is having to essentially use Don Quixote food stamps. So we're offering this."
Yeah. So it would be interesting to see what kind of tweets she's going, or the husband Usami is going to do from now to this fight.
I mean, are heat fights even aired on anything?
I don't know. I have to check.
I'm sure they're aired somewhere, but it looks like it's probably aired on their website. Who knows?
Right.
Interesting.
I mean, yeah, but we'll see. I mean, this fight has no meaning, and I have to declare that Usami has to be probably the worst MMA manager in history of this sport at this point, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So not much you can do.
Wasting away.
Wasting away talent.
So is the secret to getting Rin Nakai is that you have to flatter them, treat them really well, and then give them fights on 2 weeks' notice?
Right. And
that's so stupid, because the entire reason you put Rin Nakai on a card is to promote her as being on the card, which you can't do in 2 weeks.
Exactly. So they have to understand that, but they never do. So, I mean, it's almost sad. But again, let's see what's going to happen to her career, right, after this.
Yeah.
So let's say, he said, there's one person has commented, is all the aggravation of dealing with Rin Nakai worth the trouble for Rising? Did it pan out with Gabby Garcia? That's a good point, but whatever happened to Gabby?
I will say it's kind of different, and that Gabby Garcia's, the negative reaction to Gabby Garcia was in the ring. It was that she repeatedly missed weight or fouled her opponents.
Exactly. That's a big,
and had this kind of weird attitude about it. In Japan, they were just like, "Screw it, we've gotten what we want out of you. Goodbye."
Right.
And Rin Nakai's is more out of the ring antics.
And Rising has a girl like Shizuka Sugiyama, who would be a pretty good fight, right? Because she has a good fan base and stuff like that,
Yeah.
So it does actually worth it too. But it's a risk, though. It's a risk management. You have to think about that aspect.
For all their faults, Nakai Rin moves the needle and has a fan base. I mean, people will tune in to watch Nakai Rin.
Right. And so in a way, she's perfect for RIZIN Landmark.
Yeah.
I'm serious. I mean, with Rin Nakai and maybe Ren Hiramoto and maybe.
What would the landmark be? Some crazy BDSM studio in Tokyo?
So it's totally worth it. But again, Usami doesn't get it. He doesn't understand the value of her own wife. So that just not going to happen, right?
The sponsors she could get alone. She's always had crazy sponsorships in her fight. If she did a Rising Fuji TV card, she'd have insane sponsors.
Oh, I know.
Remember that time she came out with like the full wings and the giant sword for some video
Right.
game?
I mean, I could picture that to be a part of a game, or like
Yeah.
pachinko, whatever that is. I mean, I think it's so much possibility for her. That's too bad.
I'd also say I think we're kind of overselling the frustration of people dealing with her.
Uh-huh.
I think it's just that they make the offers to them knowing that they'll be denied, but they just feel the need to make the offers. So I imagine it's just like, oh, let's offer Nakai Rin a fight. Oh, they're still not interested. Okay, moving on.
Right. I mean, it's too
I
bad.
don't think Japanese promoters are like staying up at night, like shaking, wondering how they're going to get Nakai Rin to
They
finally
knew
fight.
exactly. They probably have to know exactly what's going to happen with them anyway, right?
Yeah.
Well, anyway, so to finish up today's podcast, let's talk about this big blow to the one championship. Seo Hee Ham out of one atomweight.
The conspiracy theorists are already talking about it.
So what's this? Like, what's the conspiracy theory?
Well, the conspiracy theory isn't it that one championship announced that they're now targeting Ham to fight Denise again in December.
Okay.
And it's like, oh, it's pretty convenient that there's this super controversial fight where a very verbal, loud fan base didn't like the decision. So all of a sudden, there's a rematch happening.
Right, but here's what it is. Not, is one paying extra prize money for this Grand Prix if you win?
I don't remember.
Oh, okay, yeah, because
the whole thing to me was always about, I don't think so. They don't really do that, do they?
I don't think
the
so.
The whole thing was that they get to fight Angela Lee.
Right.
But I will say, it's kind of, Ham Sohee on her Instagram actually stopped turned off comments for like the fight pictures, which just tells me that there was a shit ton of Filipino fans. I know I posted an interview with her, and there's some comments about like, "How dare you? You didn't win this fight." So I think there's been a very loud Filipino vocal reaction to that fight.
Okay. Well, but so the whole conspiracy theory that said they will do the rematch next year.
No, that's December.
December. Okay, but that's the day that they're going to crown this Grand Prix champion, right? No,
I think that the quarterfinals are later this month. I mean, the semifinals are later this month.
Right.
So that would make sense.
Mm-hmm. Right, because that's the 10th anniversary show for one championship, I think.
Right. Plus, it's kind of now they're left with that Brazilian girl who beat Vivi May.
Right.
So this tournament just absolutely fell apart from Ritu Fogat being in the tournament to out of the tournament to back in the tournament. Mm-hmm. Now Ham Sohee's been pulled out. It's just like this tournament just completely fell apart.
Right. So, I mean, right now, I think their best intention is to try to make either Stamp Fairtex or Itsuki Hirata a star there.
Right.
Right.
And I mean, I think Stamp Fairtex should beat Ritu Fogat.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, the girl that beat May, there's a lot of question marks with her because May is the first legitimate fighter she's fought, but May is clearly close to 40 years old, so it's kind of near the end of her end of her career. And so, if she beats Stamp, I think that'd be like what one doesn't want to happen.
Right, exactly. So I think they're probably the ideal final is Stamp against Itsuki Hirata, I assume.
100%.
Yeah.
They don't really. I don't think they have an interest in having their whole target market is Asia. Mm-hmm. I don't think they have an interest in having a Brazilian champion.
No. And besides, for Japanese market, Itsuki Hirata is the one fighter that Abema TV has been pushing pretty heavily.
A lot, almost exclusively, as far as one championship goes.
Right. And the Shinya, okay, those are probably two big draws, right, for the one championship in terms of
and market. Stamp's also insanely popular. Her she did like that picture actually you're showing is her doing a dance after her fight. Mm-hmm. And the video of that on TikTok got over 2 million views. I mean, she has a very big online presence.
And that's actually mainly coming from her own home country, I assume, no?
Yes, she's very popular in Thailand. But she also has a lot of foreign fans. One of the interesting things about One Championship is they have a really good PR department. They're very active and receptive. And they'll provide translators. So as a result, Stamp and all these fighters that don't speak English are well known in English-speaking countries because One Championship has made that accessible to them.
You know, it's so funny that I always wonder how come either UFC or Bellator or anywhere doesn't provide the translators.
Yeah.
Yeah, they never do. I mean, I don't get that. I mean, that's just going to open more door to them, more PRs, and right, obviously.
No, I I criticized One Championship for some things, but one of the things they're good at is their PR department. They have a bunch of bilingual people.
That's
and
great.
If you want to interview someone, they're like, sure, we'll provide the translator. And
That's
translators are
unique,
expensive.
right?
So, I mean, they opened up, just by doing that, they opened up their fighters to so much media exposure. Because I've interviewed Itsuki Hirata and Stamp Fairtex, and they both talk about how they have a lot of foreign fans. Itsuki was like, I want to learn English because a lot of my fans aren't Japanese. I see myself as a global fighter. I think she said she saw herself as a global fighter because so many of her fans aren't Japanese. So it's kind of interesting.
That's interesting. But I guess if you fight in North America, the whole attitude is that you better learn English, right?
Right. But I mean, what One Championship's showing is you don't have to speak English. Just have someone with you that does.
No, exactly. And on top of that, I have to always argue with the point that nobody cares how Shohei Ohtani speaks, or
No.
right? Nobody cares what Ichiro said, right? It's all
I
about
don't think
performance.
you don't have to speak English at all. You just, to do these interviews, you
Mhm.
just need someone to translate for you.
Right, exactly, right. And they could put up a good performance in the cage or field or whatever, right?
Exactly. And I mean, also one of the good things that like Stamp Fairtex and Itsuki Hirata have done is
Mhm.
One Championship has really allowed them to showcase their own personalities.
Exactly.
Something that Rising does as well.
Yes.
And like Naoki Inoue is promoted as kind of this awkward, shy guy, and they promote him that way. Watanabe Shuto has this squeaky, high-pitched voice, and they promote him that way. Stamp is kind of a silly person that likes to do these funny dances, and they promote her that way. And Itsuki has the whole hip hop culture that she likes, and they allow her to show what she likes to do.
Yeah, actually, it's like what UFC does. That kind of makes sense in the sense they're thinking about the UFC brand, so they want to put fighters into sort of like the same kind of umbrella, right, in terms of branding. Right. But for the other promotions, they have to rely on more individual popularity, so it kind of makes sense to do that.
Well, now I will say the funny thing about One Championship is the thumbnails for some of these fights are absolutely ridiculous. Like if you look at the YouTube page, the thumbnails for the fights are like the girls in bikinis or like glamour shots. It looks like what the hell is it's like some guy at One Championship like trying to create a dating site. Like what are these thumbnails they're making? So but they take a lot of swings and misses. So.
And I'm sure there's a proving process there, right?
Yeah, they're like sex sells, bikini pictures. But
that's funny though. I mean, it can't be the all same, So
no, and it's the differences that make it fun, or else it just get boring.
Exactly. Right. So I'm still looking forward to see this One Championships, and so we'll see. So let's come back in 2 weeks. We can talk about the. Let's see. If we come back in 2 weeks, can we talk about the RIZIN? Not yet, huh?
We can talk about the results from the next deep card
That
and
too,
the Pancrase.
Sure. And by then,
all of the former date fighters are fighting on Pancrase. It's going to be great.
That's interesting, right? I know the whole what happened behind the scenes, but that's okay. It's going to be interesting.
I know that our fans are desperate to know what the team date fighters are up to, so we'll be able to let them know.
Well, I know. Let's talk about that. Yeah, maybe we could do deep,
including the one who fought Kai Asakura.
That's true, right? We can talk about that too. Yeah. All right. So we'll see you in 2 weeks.
Yes.
All right. All right. So thank you for everybody for listening, and have a nice day, Charlie.
I hope you get some sleep with the baby and the kid.
Yeah, I know. I'm going to try to get a straight sleep, at least 3-4 hours at this time.
All right.
Okay. All right. Have a good day.